Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and Jon Chai.
Welcome, my friends, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, it is Tuesday, which means it's a tactical day, and I am your host, Coach Brad Wilson, founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com. I'm joined by my co-host, Jon Chai. How are we doing, sir?
Doing good. Got a pretty fun episode lined up today. The theme is river raises. I actually think that the question in this episode might surprise you for most of these hands. It's not so much whether or not I should have raised the river, but what size I should raise the river to. I think at least three out of the four hands, you'll be on board with the action of raising. I don't know what you'll think about the sizes that I picked though.
Sure. I think it's a, sizing. We did just the question of like whether or not to bet, what action to take, I think is the primary consideration that most folks like really think about, like what should I do? After that though, like when you are placing a bet, when you're placing a raise, you also need to know what size to use because, we play a game that is called No Limit Texas Holdem, which means there's literally no limit to how much you can bet, how much you can raise to. You can raise to whatever you would like, and you can place a bet for whatever amount you would like. And within that just infinite possibilities, that spectrum of possibilities, you need to find the most efficient size that gets whatever goal you have accomplished. And I think that like sizing is an aspect of playing the game that just for the listener, you have to pay attention to. It's just a major priority in every hand that you play. Like what size did villain bet? What size should I bet? If I raise, what size should I raise to? Like sizing is kind of everything when you really get down to it. So yeah, happy to give some feedback on these river raises. So without any further ado, let's just see what the heck was going on.
So this hand, we're playing 500 zone. I'm in the big blind with queen 10 offsuit. The small blind raises, folds around to him, makes it 15. Just going to call here. Queen 10 off. So this hand is going to look familiar to you, Brad. I actually shared this hand a couple days ago at a group coaching session with the CPG Wolves, the CFP that we run. And this kind of like your feedback on this hand a couple days ago actually like got me thinking about a lot of other hands where I decided to raise a river and now I'm like going back and thinking that I might have made a sizing mistake. So this hand just kind of is to set up the next two hands for both you and the listener. But so okay. We'll start here. 9-9-3, two tone, two clubs, a spade, single raise pot. Small blind starts out with a 1/3 pot C bet. Nothing particularly exciting so far, both pre-flop and on the flop until now, where I decide to raise.
Yeah, so raising 1/3 with some decent blockers. I guess you block the queen 9, you block queens, you block 10s, you block 9-10. I think it's a reasonable board to raise on. You can also turn clubs and gives you
can turn a lot of future equity with this hand.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with raising. I think calling is also on the table, like either option are perfectly reasonable to take. So chose raise this time, villain calls. So the flop was 9-9 tray with the 9 tray of clubs. Turn is a 4 of diamonds. You have queen 10 with the queen of clubs, 10 of spades. So turn is a total brick. There's 119 in the pot. The small blind checks. I kind of presume that because you have a lot of different cards to pick up equity on, a jack, a king, an 8, a club, that's probably not going to be making a ton of future, a ton of investments here on the turn. Like I suspect that you're, you're raising the flop to realize fold equity. You're raising the flop to over realize your actual equity of your hand. Once kind of none of that happens, just shutting down would be my assumption.
Yep. And like you said, like all those turn cards that you mentioned, like the clubs, the jacks, the kings, and the eights, would definitely be more likely to barrel those turns. But the four of diamonds, just the absolute brick. We don't pick up any extra equity. We probably don't pick up any extra fold equity on a card that's smaller than a 9. So decide to check back here with my queen high and just kind of take whatever equity I do have and hope to realize it.
Yeah, so let's try to realize your pair equity, right? That's the equity. You check back. Oh wow! How do you do it? You realize your pair equity with the best pair. The river is a queen of hearts. So now you went from nothing. You went from nobody to somebody.
Pretty good hand now, yeah.
You're a contender. Small blind bets a quarter, so a block size on the river. And here we are at the theme and major decision point within the hand. Villain bets a quarter. Do you raise? Do you not raise? That is the question.
I felt pretty good about raising it. I was a little bit surprised to see block on the river. Maybe I shouldn't be. But I expected a little bit more of a, or not a little bit more. I just expected a larger size, a more polar size on the river. I think the block size, to me, sort of what it's saying is that the small blind is trying to thin value bet a hand like 8, 7, 6s, 5s, 10s, jacks, maybe.
Maybe
he picks the block size with a hand like aces and kings too. Like, can we go? Do you think we can go like that high up?
Maybe like 5s too.
Yeah.
I'm suspicious that villain's splitting sizes here on the river when they use the block.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty suspicious that, you know, this size is selected with a specific range of hands that is probably somewhere in the ballpark of, you know, what we've already said. I think that like with aces and kings, they can just polarize. With a 9, probably just going to polarize the river. Like, I think greed kind of kicks in. Like, maybe this villain is just betting their range for a quarter on the river. If so, that feels like a natural mistake, just strategically. So, yeah, I imagine villains likely splitting sizes here, which, you know, means that they've got 2 buckets. You know, they have 2 ranges to manage. They've got a small bet and a really big bet. And the problem with the small bet is that generally the hands they put in their really big bet range are going to be their 9x and aces and kings. So they can beat like, you know, a rivered queen or something like that. So yeah, some removal effect here. I would say the downside of for us raising the river is like, they're still uncapped. We are probably capped once we check.
Oh, we're definitely capped once we check back the turn.
Right?
Yeah.
So reopening the action and giving villain just sort of that inkling of like, oh wait, like I can just jam everything that I have here, and
right,
you know, what are they going to do about it, right? That's always a scary proposition, but I think in general I'm probably always more afraid of that possibility than it actually occurs. I think I see the opportunity, but I think lots of players just don't see that opportunity of like bet jamming. But it is something like, you know, for the listener, as you move up in stakes, right? Like people will find this bet jam with a hand like 10s or jacks, like just turn them into a bluff and recognize like, yo, yeah, you don't have boats, I've got the boats. You don't have trips, I have trips in my range. Like let's dance. So just something to say. And they bet a quarter. You know, you raise like minimum. I would just polarize here and raise big, especially after checking back the turn. And yeah.
So this was, I thought, like the most interesting part of the hand for me, and like what sort of prompted like the questions, like all the future questions that we're going to have in this episode about the other spots where I raised the river. So I brought this hand into the CPG Wolves hand history review session. And my question on the river was like, hey, do you think this is too thin? Just raising the river at all? Should I just call the quarter pot with
Sure.
a hand like Queen 10, or do you think this hand is good enough to raise? And your response really surprised me because like you not only thought that this was like a slam dunk raise spot, but you said that you would have raised much bigger than the size that I would have gone, just polarized versus their jacks, tens, eights, sevens, whatever. Like it's sort of when we raise small versus when we raise really big, we're kind of just letting them off the hook versus the small size. And I think they're, those sorts of hands are like you said, like very likely to also just call a really big raise on the river because of how my range is constructed. Once I do something wacky, like raise the flop, check back the turn, and then, get to the river.
Personally, I'm a big fan of polarizing when we have limited top of range hands, like limited value hands to kind of pull from, which, in my opinion, what happens when you polarize and they have limited hands to call with is they're just, when we polarize and we have limited value hands to pull from, they're just naturally going to expand their calling range because they recognize, like, come on, like you've really checked back a boat on it. You really check back trips on the turn. And then just go into kind of bluff catch mode. So I would go much bigger here. I'm not sure how big I can, take it, but at least, the size of the pot is 148. So like at least 150 is kind of where I would land.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's probably something that I've been just messing up, or at least not thinking about properly in other like river raise spots. Is just like I sort of look at my hand and I'm like, oh, this is like, to me this raise already feels really thin, so like in order to get called by enough worse hands, I should go small. And I think that's very likely, like, when you pointed this out to me, like I realized like that's very likely a mistake that I'm making all over the place when I'm doing these thinner river raises, or at least what feels to me to be like a thinner river raise. So the next few hands are just going to follow kind of this theme of like, hey, I got to the river and I think I should raise and can raise. Am I picking the wrong size?
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to hand number 2. So for the just closure of the hand, villain folded, and I don't know what they had.
It ended up being nothing.
They have the old Jack 10 off, which again, I think like that small river bet is you were value raising on the flop. Actually, you were,
hilarious.
Yeah, just that small river bet. I think they will have some bluffs in there too. And what can you do? So here you have Jack 10 of hearts on the button, playing 4-handed. The cutoff opens 230. Looks like you're playing 5-10, and you have 150 big blinds effective. Villain calls your 3-bet, and you see a flop of king, king, jack with the king of hearts. There's 195 in the pot. Again, I think like you can bet here on the flop. You could bet a third. You could bet a quarter. You could check behind. All of those options are pretty viable, I think. But
likely picking between some small size and check.
Yeah, I don't really see much benefit in betting big. You opt to check behind, and the turn is a queen of hearts. So now you have a royal draw to go along with your pair. So pretty nice turn. Although, don't really, since you check back the flop, even if you would have bet small and they would have called, still would be checking back the turn. I think it's difficult to get value from worse on this board. And the river, you river a heart, and once again, river's a 4 of hearts. So final board's king, king, queen, jack 4 with the king, queen 4 of hearts. And villain bets, I don't even know what this size is. Like
it's a little less than
29%, something like that. And you are clearly going to raise with your flush for value. So, this one's interesting as it relates to size because you don't really have a ton of natural bluffs.
Correct.
Like that's kind of you don't have a ton of like no equity hands that like, I guess suited connectors or something that didn't bet the flop or the turn. So like you don't really have any bluffs here.
So you're saying like the bluffs here would just be like my 8-9 of spades, or something
Probably
like, yeah.
like maybe ace 5 of diamonds if you decided to play it this way. All of those hands going to be quite rare. The jack of clubs not being a heart, opens the door for all of these type of hands. Ace jack of hearts. I guess jack 10 of hearts, only two really that you have in range. The only two flushes. Yeah, looks like you have a deficit of like backdoor hearts as well as a deficit of bluffs.
Would have to like turn pairs with a heart into a bluff here. Like if I check back tens with a heart, nines with a heart,
Yeah, something like
those
that.
sorts of hands.
Yeah. I mean, regardless, I think you probably still should just raise big. Somewhere in the order of pot again, I guess would be my where I would land. Maybe like 300 or something, but
And just like no real like target in mind, right? Do you, or it's just sort of just like
ace queen.
Yeah, that's like something that I try to think about when I'm raising, is just like, okay, like when I'm raising, like what hands do I expect to get called by that are worse? And like, again, like, this is a spot where maybe because like I have so few bluffs here, like you said, that I'm struggling to like find our opponent's bet calls here.
You don't have a ton of value either though. Like, most of your boats just bet at some point.
Yeah,
leading up.
I have like ace jack of hearts and jack 10 of hearts, right?
Yeah,
like
that's
like
what I said.
two
Like
hands that like
those
make
are
sense.
the right. So like ace 5 of hearts, like the nut flush probably bets a turn.
Yeah,
right? Probably bets the flop. It's very rarely going to be checking both streets. So like 9-10 is a straight on the turn. So like you're never checking 9-10 on the turn. So in my mind, like they're queen 10 suiteds, they're ace queens that maybe they did, like ace queen suiteds that they didn't 4-bet pre-flop. Ace queen off is probably going to be a 4-bet pre, but regardless, like those are the type of hands I would expect to bet small and then potentially call. Maybe ace jack, like maybe they go down to like ace jack to block.
I think for this size they could.
Yeah, I think those are probably your targets, and then like kind of maybe more rarely they would have some trips, like if but I guess trips are just quite unlikely in that they didn't bet the turn. And
yeah. Which again, like that sort of makes my, I think that made me a little tentative about raising really big, was that like, I think they would bet trips on the turn. I think they would bet straights on the turn.
I mean, you're polarizing it. Like I said, like it's just that they're going to have a lot of single paired hands, and yeah. Ooh, so you did.
I do go big size.
Yeah, from 58 to 368. Now you just got to fade the jam. That's the
yeah.
They fold.
We do fade the jam.
Yeah, at some point it begins to get like at some point with villains bluff catchers, they're going to get a little suspicious, right? Like the bigger investment that you make on the river, they're probably, it's like, okay, yeah, like
so go big but not too big.
I mean, yes, I don't think this is like necessarily too big. It's a little bit bigger than I would have gone, but that doesn't really, like, what does that even mean, right? Like people surprise me by what they call with.
That's why this spot is so hard for me, because it's just like, it's like a little bit bigger than you would have gone, but like there's no like, it's like hard for me to calibrate. Like, is this too big? Is this, am I in the right, right region? This guy's nines with a heart. Like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're trying to value bet against 8s and 7s and ace high. So yeah, I think Raise is clearly right. I would have gone like 250, but whatever. I don't really see. I don't know that 370 gets called at a substantially different frequency than 250.
Right.
It's kind of subjective, right?
Yeah, which is why it's such a tough problem. I think
it is. It is. Well, that's going to do it for this first half of the show. We're going to have a couple more hands coming at you right after the break. Stick around. More river raises coming down.
Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.
All right. Welcome back from the break. Hope you enjoyed that terrible setup going to the segue of CPG Wolves. And, you know, if you hated it, I guess you hated it. But be sure to check out CPG Wolves if you would like to learn on a daily basis from both John and I. cpgwolves.com. It's our coaching for profit operation where, you know, outside of Tactical Tuesday, I spend almost all of my energy interacting and coaching and teaching and thinking about poker and how to play the game at the highest levels that a human can possibly play the game. So cpgwolves.com, if that's something that floats your boat. And now we got an ace and a 4 of the same suit, which is a raising hand when you're 3-handed and on the button. And it doesn't really matter how many-handed you are. I think nobody can just fold in.
It doesn't even actually matter if someone's raised before you. It's still a raising hand.
Right. It's just this hand, you're just gonna put money in the pot with this hand, right? So you open on the button 3x, and the big blind calls. You're playing 500, no limit, and you've got 100 bigs. Flop is queen 9-7 with the queen 7 of spades and the 9 of clubs. So you flop absolutely nothing on this queen high board. There's 3250 in the pot. The big blind checks. Now it's your action.
Gonna be checking this board. Super dynamic. Expect the check raise frequency to be higher than average on queen 9-7 two-tone. Expect villain to find tons of easy calls with, you know, just all their pairs, but also just like the tons of pair plus draw, the tons of draws. So you know, with my absolutely nothing, my red ace 4 of hearts on queen 9-7 all black, just gonna be checking back here and hopefully looking to do some stuff on later streets.
All right. So check back. Oh, you do a thing. You turn a 4. So the turn is a flush completer, 4 of spades. So now there's a flush available. John has ye old bottom pair. Villain bets a third. And hey, they gave us such a good price, right? They made a callable bet.
Yeah, super small on the turn. Little bit surprised to see this size on a really wet board. Would expect maybe a larger size, given that, you know, they can have lots of bluffs on this board to balance out whatever hands they decide to value bet. But whatever, we're getting a little bit over 4-1 with bottom pair. Happy to be getting a super good price. And
I mean, if you didn't turn a 4, then their $10 bet would look a little bit better, right? Like I think you probably do have ace deuce, ace 3, ace 5. Just red suited king X, like they're hands that they can target using this small size. It just so happens that you turned a pair, right? If you had ace 5 of hearts, then this bet would be a little bit more annoying. But
well, then we'd have the turn raises episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to stop turning pairs, and so we can look at turn raises. Yeah. So you call, and you river trip. So about as good of a run out as one could imagine with the ace 4 of hearts on queen 9-7.
Darn 4 of spades. It should have been the 4 of clubs. Then we would have had a perfect run out.
Yeah. You just got to work with what you're given, you know, and in this case, you're given very little with trips with the best kicker possible after flopping nothing. The river, they do another block size, so 15 into 52. Once again, it's, I mean, this one I would be going really big. Like, I think just kind of instinctually,
I think there's, I don't know if this is going to affect your raise size at all, but I think there's like a little bit of context and like reading into we can do on like the player type or the archetype of villain once he picks 15 on the river. So I couldn't read too much into the turn size, but it is like a non-hotkey size, just like this flat $10, 2 big blinds. Same thing on the turn with like the 3 big blinds. So like that sort of starts getting me suspicious that this is either a fish or maybe like a weaker reg, someone who like doesn't have the 1/3 or like the block hotkey setup and is just trying to do the best they can with the with like the slider. Does that
make sense? I mean, you just click twice.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that's going to affect my raise size at all. Like, I'm just going to be going big here, and the bigger. Basically, the only question that I have in my mind is how big is too big. If I were trying, a question that the listener can prime themselves is like, if you were trying to fold out a queen, what size would you go to if that were your goal? And what size would you be afraid to raise to, right? And so like, would I be afraid to raise to 110 if I had like, whatever, ace 10 with the 10 of spades? I'm not going to say afraid, but I would expect it to get called at a decent clip if they have a queen. So 160. Okay, like maybe that's kind of reaching the limits of the size that I would choose. So I'd probably go somewhere between like 140 to 200 on the river.
I really like that methodology, by the way, for like figuring out array size on the river, because that's really what I'm trying to get at here with this episode. Is just like how can I like systematize like my sizing choice on the river when I'm deciding to raise for value. And like the thing that you suggested, I think is really good just now, is just like, hey, like imagine that they have some sort of top pair like close to the top of their value betting region when they pick these sizes. How much more do you think that top pair will call? And you could start out really small and be like, hey, I could click it here to 30 and I'll definitely get called by a queen. You went all the way up to like 115, 120, and you were pretty sure that you'd get called by a queen for those sizes too. So yeah, just use that as sort of like a way to at least have a system or have some sort of like logical process for deciding what size I raise to.
Yeah, for sure. Like if there's a size that you'd be terrified to bluff with or using, then just because you think they're going to call too often, that's kind of like your starting point, right? And how far do you press the envelope after you make it to that starting point? So you go to 120, and I think, like it's, this is actually 2x pot, right? So there's 67.5 in the pot. You're raising 120, so it's 2x. So it's not like a small raise by any stretch.
Right.
Can you press it? I'm not sure. I would try probably.
See if the 120 works. Oh,
the 120 works. So we have potential.
Wait, we got to make sure he doesn't have a flush. Okay.
Yeah. So you make a 120. They call with 10 of hearts, 9 of spades. So that's second pair. Not anywhere close to folding out top pair with 120. Pair, yeah. So I think 155 to 190 worth thinking about.
Right. It's so crazy because like when you think about it in those terms, it's like, okay, yeah, 120 got called. But then like the thing that I think about when I raised this, I said I did what you did, and I was like, okay, this is 2x pot. Raising to like 2, like we're starting to get into like 3x pot, like raise size territory, which that's like really, really big. But clearly that should have been closer to the size that I was thinking about, given that 120 gets called by second pair.
Yeah. Like this one was pretty immediate. Intuitively was like bigger is better here. I just know that bigger is going to perform quite well.
Yeah.
All right. Final hand of this river raising episode on Tactical Tuesday. You've got the 6 Dewey in the big blind. You have 100 big blinds. The cutoff opens min. The small blind calls. They are obnoxiously deep in this. They're both like 400 big blinds deep.
I'm just trying to get in there with my with my 100 big blinds, guys. Like
trying to sneak in with the 6 Dewey. Yeah. So you call getting 5-1 pre-flop with your suited disconnector.
Also likely a fish in the small blind once
Sure.
he flats the 2x. A little bit more acceptable to flat given that it's a min open, but still probably a
most likely.
Yeah.
So you call and you get exactly everything you dreamt of. Ace King 3 with the Ace King of Hearts. So you flop your flush draw. You're happy.
With a 3 straight. Oh, this is too much. Almost.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. I know.
Yeah.
Try to contain yourself for the rest of this episode. Flop checks through. You turn a 6. So now you have a pair and a flush draw. I think I would check the turn. I don't really see much benefit in betting the turn once you turn a pair. Betting doesn't make a lot of sense. So the river's a 4 of diamonds. This is, and
we're not value raising here.
Yeah, I see. I'm seeing the
we
punchline.
couldn't do a river raised episode without having one hand where I turn a pair into a bluff.
Yeah, I'm seeing what's going on now. I'm catching the joke. So John has third pair. The small blind who flatted bet 2/3. So the question is, raise or
call or fold. I don't know if call is really an option.
Call, fold. I think the problem with calling is you're often going to get overcalled.
Yeah.
By the cutoff, and
yes,
you would like to fold the cutoff out.
But I think we should talk about the cutoff for a little bit first. Just like he checks back 3 times or twice, multi-way, both the flop and the turn.
Yeah.
Just what are your thoughts on what you think the cutoffs range is? You mentioned right now that you think you wouldn't be shocked if the cutoff overcalls once I call this $20. Does that mean that you think that the cutoff has a very showdown heavy range once he checks twice multi-way?
I don't know. I mean, they're going to have hands that will want them go make it to showdown. I know that. Like, I don't know that showdown heavy would be the word that I would use. It's just they have hands that will call a bet, basically.
Sure.
King, queen, king, jack, any king really that's not 2 pair.
Maybe even like the weakest ace X's, right? If
ace
they decide
deuce,
to open
ace deuce, ace 5, or ace deuce, ace 5, probably ace 7, ace 8 as well.
Right.
Those hands are like not substantially better. Even ace 9 is kind of the same as like ace deuce. So like I could imagine them checking back like a lot of ace X, a lot of king X, that are just happy to call a river bet in this situation. So,
and we can almost certainly fold all of those hands out by raising here.
Probably, yeah. I imagine. Like, depends on your size that you raise. If you click it, then like you're not gonna fold out an ace. I don't think. I think an ace will still call.
Okay.
But yeah, I think so. And then we're like trying to parlay that into that sort of threat of the cutoff having an ace or a king, eliminating that threat, and then also the small blind. We're trying to fold out whatever they're betting here on the river. Yeah, I don't think I like it. The more I'm talking about this and looking at it, the more I'm like, I don't like doing whatever.
What do you not like? Well, why don't you like it?
I don't like the parlay you've got to hit in order for this to like be good. You need the small blind to fold out an ace, first of all.
You don't think they could value bet thinner than an ace here?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think they're value betting like king queen, for instance, which is like, that's the best hand that's not an ace is king queen. I don't think they're betting king queen typically. So you're really targeting like an ace at minimum with a small blind. The cutoff, once you raise, like they're most likely just folding most of the time. Like I think you're getting through them like quite often, but maybe 10% of the time they call or do something, right?
Yeah, or they river ace 4 or something.
They river ace 4 or set of 4s or something like that. So there are like some of, it's not a lock that the cutoff folds every time, but they're going to fold most of the time. The biggest problem for me is making the small blind fold a hand like ace 10. The investment
So how do you think about this like situation? Because I think this is what really makes the spot tough for me. Is like, I don't know how often we fold out the small blind, but we almost always fold out the cutoff, like you said. The small blind's betting region here definitely includes some air, right? Like,
Sure.
presumably has some bluffs too, which we are ahead of with a 6.
Yeah.
Which makes raising, like, which sort of leans me, I don't know, towards
Yeah.
call than raise. But the small blind has also given us this like opportunity to fold out the cutoff, which we wouldn't have unless they bet, right? Because like we can't fold out the cutoff's check back range, the showdown bound check back range, if the small blind doesn't bet and we get a chance.
In which case, the only size that is available to you would be like minimum.
Okay.
And minimum or like a pot, so like $50. I think those are the most obvious raise sizes, because then you can both fold out the cutoff. They're bluff catchers.
Yeah.
And essentially that's what you're targeting, right? That's the actual target, is the cutoff's bluff catchers. It's not the small blind. You're just kind of presuming that the small blind will have bluffs that they'll just fold. Like, right. The hope is that the small blind has a bluff and the cutoff has a bluff catcher. And again, like we're talking about like multi-way parlays that we're trying to hit here. Maybe like that $50 investment is good. If you're going to have to fold out the small blind much more often than normal because of the added variable of the cutoff who's going to call at some frequency. Yeah. You're not going to fold them out at 100%, no matter what.
Right. So we have to make up for the cutoff's ace 4s and pocket 4s by folding out the small blind a little bit more frequently than we normally would have to if we were clicking it.
Correct.
Like our price to bluff is not what it appears to be.
Yeah, it's worse because you're trying to battle through 2 players instead of a single player, and that just always makes things more complicated.
Gotcha. But at the end of the day, you would just fold here.
Yeah.
Just all that. Okay.
I think I would just fold. But again, you could probably make an argument for making it like 50, like, or 45, or even clicking it. Like, I think there might be an argument to be made for that, but to quantify that as like being a plus EV investment, I'm not sure. Yeah. I think this size is just too big.
Too big. Yeah. It's not like getting anything extra done versus the small blind, and we can go smaller and still fold out the cutoff. That's what I would imagine. Yeah.
You make it 75, the cutoff folds, the small blind folds. If you were to fold out like an ace, that would be quite a good part of this. But as we said, so ace king 6 tray 4 was the final board. You folded out 8-9 high. That was a small blind, and then king 9 suited, which was the cutoff. So yeah, if you would have went smaller, I'm pretty sure that all the same stuff gets accomplished at a lower investment, basically.
Yeah. I can just dream that the 75 folds out like ace 5 sometimes from the small blind.
Sure. Then, raise to 75 next time in this spot, target an ace to fold, and just see how it works out. Yeah.
I was so excited with the small blind bet because
we literally in the last set we raised 2x pot and got called by second pair, and now you're like, maybe one day that fold out like ace 5. Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that.
This is multi-way.
If you ever wonder whether or not John is an eternal optimist, just look at this episode of Tactical Tuesday, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So, with all that said, I think John is frozen. I'm just going to end this frozen here with John's face locked in this crazy smile. Oh, you're back. You stopped smiling. All right. Just in time for your catchphrase.
See you next week.
See you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter. Join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.